Story 1. When I got my first job and my own apartment, I bought a sword. I had always wanted one and nobody could tell me no. I ended up with 3 in total and I loved them. As I got older, I cared less about them and eventually gave them away. They were mine when I wanted them, and that is what mattered. Story 2. I had been begging my parents for a dog since I was 6 years old, but they never let me have one. After I moved out and got my own place, I was in Petco getting supplies for my small pets when there was a dog adoption event. I was momentarily sad that I could not get one. Then I realized I could, so I adopted one. Best decision. Story 3. I had a Dole Whip at Disneyland. I went there with my now wife when we first started dating. It had been over 10 years since I had last been there. We passed the Dole Whip stand and I thought, wait, I have adult money now. I am going to get one. Now we get a float every time we go and my wife always eats half. Story 4. Soldering iron, torque wrench, skateboards, and a PlayStation. Story 5. A horse. My first paycheck. I had a pony listed first on every letter to Santa, but I did not get one. So I bought one as soon as possible. I spent 30 happy years as a horse owner. No, Mom, it was not a phase I would grow out of. Story 6. I always wanted to buy clothes from American Eagle and Hollister, but my parents never had the money for that. When I got my first job, I bought a pair of jeans from American Eagle with my first paycheck. I thought it was very satisfying at the time. Story 7. 3 years ago, I fulfilled a childhood dream by buying a replica of Anduril at the Renaissance Festival. Story 8. The first thing I did was buy a gaming console that I could never convince my parents to get. Felt like I had unlocked my childhood downloadable content. Story 9. Sugary name brand cereal. We always had the store brand healthy cereal. I always wanted to know what a bowl of Corn Pops or Fruit Loops tasted like. When I got my first apartment, I bought 3 boxes for my pantry. One Christmas, I gave my siblings a few boxes and they were so moved. When I became a parent, we went back to the healthy cereal, but I did splurge on the name brand occasionally. I still smile every time I walk down the cereal aisle. Story 10. My parents refused to buy CDs and some name brand clothes. I took good care of those things. They taught me the value of working for what I wanted. Story 11. I found unusual food in the grocery store. Snow peas are great. Jikamas taste like a blue-collar portable toilet. I could have picked a bad one. Story 12. When I started earning adult money, I bought a slot car racetrack and set it up on my pool table. I had begged for one my whole childhood with no luck, but once I had disposable income, it was race time. Story 13. Viennetta, the ice cream dessert the commercials made you think was only for rich people. I bought it with my first adult paycheck, and it did not live up to the hype. Story 14. I had a little toy when I was a kid, a Pokemon pencil topper. It was NTI, my favorite Pokemon of Generation 2. I lost it playing in a lake, and I have missed it ever since because they do not make them anymore. A few years ago, when I was 27, I realized 2 things. I had adult money, and the online marketplace eBay existed. It was not even expensive, but buying it healed a sad childhood part of me that had lost what felt like a dear friend. Story 15. My dog. I was never allowed a dog as a child. My parents thought dogs were dirty and did not have time to look after one. Now I am living my dream. Story 16. My parents were always renters, but I bought my own apartment and paid off my 30-year mortgage in 13 years. It was the best investment I ever made, including the 12 years I lived there. Story 17. In 1983, I received my first paycheck. Hot rollers and a giant can of Aquanet were essentials. On my next trip to the mall, I blended perfectly into the crowd. Big hair was so popular that decade that we might as well have put a hole in the ozone layer. Story 18. All those fancy cereals my mom said no to. Turns out I wasn't missing much. I do love Cocoa Puffs. Story 19. Jordans. I hunted down old, out-of-circulation Adidas, British Knights, and Reebok pumps, David Robinson Air Force Commanders, Nike Solo Flights, and Delta Forces. Sneakers I never could have. Story 20. After I started working and moved out of the house, I bought some clothes and shoes. Story 21. I found a sweater I liked in my size at full price. No discount racks, no markdowns, and no second guessing. Story 22. A pinball machine, specifically a funhouse. I bought it over 20 years ago and still have it. Story 23. Nice clothes. Not really expensive, but not hand-me-downs. Story 24. I always wanted to learn to ride. Once I was earning enough, I bought riding lessons in a horse, and later I bought 2 more. Story 25. I bought and built the gaming personal computer I have wanted my whole life. I am using it right now to type this. It is amazing and has loads of red, green, and blue lighting that no one sees except my children and me. It has given me virtually unlimited productivity and entertainment. It is the best purchase I have ever made. Story 26. Stupid souvenirs from Disneyland. Clothes I like that are actually flattering. Airplane tickets. Story 27. I got a MacBook a few months ago. I fell in love with Apple when I first saw the G3 as a kid, but I knew they existed in a whole other world than the one I lived in. It is as incredible as I wanted it to be as an adult. Story 28. Black bikini underwear. My mother was a fervent devotee of white cotton granny pants. Story 29. Not exactly when I started earning, but when I earned enough to take out a mortgage and buy a house, I bought a Citizens Band radio. Story 30. Bras that fit well. I developed very early, and my family could not afford properly fitting bras because they were expensive. For the most part, I wore sports bras. When I received my first paycheck at 16, I went for a professional fitting and bought my first well-fitting bra. I will never forget how great it felt to finally have the right support. Story 31. Cake for breakfast. Whenever I wanted something sweet for breakfast or one of the very sugary chocolate cereals, my mom would say, "When you have your own house, you can have cake for breakfast if you want, but not now." One moody weekend, I went to the grocery store and bought a cake. I went home and said, "Screw it. I am going to eat cake for breakfast." Good habits did not grow from that. Story 32. A popcorn machine. My name in lights like one of those pink neon signs that YouTubers have. Thrones, theater props repurposed as seats in my living room. Story 33. Pizza was too exotic for my repressed backward hillbilly father, so we never had it. Story 34. A Honda S2000. I have wanted one forever and always used it in games. Story 35. I wanted the video game SpongeBob SquarePants. Battle of Bikini Bottom. My great-uncle used to buy me things every week when we took him grocery shopping, but he refused to buy that game because he thought I was trying to trick him into buying a naughty game about bikini bottoms. I finally bought it myself a few years ago. Story 36. I wanted snacks that would not immediately disappear the second I brought them home. If it was not a vegetable, my father and older brother inhaled it. We bought a dozen donuts and they were gone before the end of the day. I made several batches of cookies and they were gone before I could even have one. Friends gave me treats or candy, but they ate them because family shares. On my birthday, when I got a cake, I managed to have one piece before everyone devoured the rest. I bought a pack of candy bars and my father ate all but one in a 4-hour period. I got in trouble for eating the last one I had bought without asking. Story 37. An old German Democratic Republic toy that looks like an Eastern Bloc apartment building. I have been dreaming about it since I was 6. Story 38. Pork chops, mashed potatoes, Mr. Kipling's apple pie with condensed milk. I felt so mature. Story 39. I had been begging my mother to get me a Nintendo 3DS ever since it first came out. I finally bought a used one with my own money in 2018. Story 40. Video games. When I was a kid, Nintendo Power and Personal Computer Gamer, all those magazines at the bookstore had tons of walkthroughs, codes, features, and amazing tips for games I would never see unless a friend rented them from Blockbuster or a free demo compact disc was included. When I finally had disposable income, I would watch an indie Let's Play or see a Steam advertisement that seemed mildly interesting and just buy the game, or buy remasters of my favorites. Looking at you, Final Fantasy series, I have probably purchased it 30 times. Unfortunately, most of those games barely got past the installation phase, let alone gathered more than an hour of playtime. By the time I figured out the controls and the heads-up display, I was out of time for the day. Now they just sit on my wish list and I get email notifications when they go on sale. Also, I am really bad at video games. Damned monkey's paw. Story 41. Electric scooters solve the problem of kick scooters with plastic wheels, and they are as fast as cars. Story 42. I kept store-bought cake frosting in a plastic tub. I assumed that as an adult I could have it for dinner. Story 43. I used to browse catalogs and magazines, wishing I could own every video game and piece of technology. Now I own every major gadget that is released, buy the games I won on release day, and have an endless backlog, laughing out loud. Story 44. I always wanted remote control cars as a kid. When I was 18, I received a lawsuit settlement and bought 3 cars, 1 for me and 2 for my friends, $300 each, more if we added accessories. Mine had a Celine S7 frame. I loved that thing. I tried to buy a remote control plane priced at $500, but the owner refused and explained, "Son, you would break that thing in a day. Come by once a week. I'll show you how to fly it, and then I'll sell it to you." He was an older man, the amazing granddad type. I always appreciated that small gesture. He could have taken my money and let me waste it. Story 45. Mickey ears at Disney World. My parents said they were a waste of money. They were right, but I love them. Story 46. I always wanted to surf, but we couldn't afford a surfboard. Now I make good money but don't have time to surf. Story 47. Does Disneyland count? When I was a kid, my parents told me it was a waste of money and never took me. As an adult who now lives a state away, I have gone easily more than a dozen times, sometimes with my kids, sometimes alone. Story 48. I bought my first motorcycle at age 15. It wasn't really grown-up money. It was money from my paper route that my parents had convinced me to save for college. I never made it to college, but I had a blast on that bike. Story 49. PlayStation 5. An ultra-high-definition projector with a powerful sound system, and a Mercedes-Benz. The best part is that I moved 1,800 kilometers away from them. Story 50. I wish I could say something mature and sensible, but in reality it was a biker jacket and purple hair dye. Story 51. Playmobil toys. I always wanted some, but they were hard to find and expensive. Now I have a small collection. Story 52. A puppet dragon from the Renaissance Fair. I always wanted one, but my parents could not afford it and had no idea how expensive they are. I got him last year. Story 53. A sports car, a 2-seater. Impractical but fun. Story 54. A bedazzler. How many years passed after I became an adult before I realized I could buy one just because? That is a real problem, though. Story 55. Food. I grew up very poor, and if it was not for free lunches at school, I would have starved. Weekends were extremely tough. Story 56. I had a stuffed Ewok and fun costumes. My parents never bought Halloween costumes, so I had to make my own from a bin of their old clothes. Story 57. A subscription to Cosmopolitan magazine so I could have it on my coffee table in my apartment. Story 58. A 1983 Jeep Grand Wagoneer in 1994. I do not miss it. They do not age well in New England. Story 59. The first adult thing I bought was a complete surround sound system in 2002. 5 speakers, a huge subwoofer, a substantial receiver, and tons of speaker wire. 2 years later, when I moved out, I realized how inconvenient it is to disassemble a surround sound system and reinstall it in a new place. Never again. Story 60. I just bought the high-heeled Converse I always wanted when I was a teen. I love them. I might get a nice-looking dagger in the future. Story 61. Buy a high-quality trap gun and a long-range rifle, and ensure you can afford ammunition for competitive shooting. Story 62. It was not me. My brother bought a Nintendo 64 when he started making money. Story 63. I paid my car insurance in full for 6 months. It felt like a financial achievement to be well off enough to take care of things like that. Story 64. A pony or a horse, close enough. Also, my children had tubs of Lego bricks. Story 65. Family trips. I never traveled as a child. I love being able to afford new places and experiences. Story 66. My fight or flight response is activated by ragged socks and underwear. Story 67. We could have neither Miracle Whip nor an operation game in my home. Story 68. Organizers for basically everything. Clear organizers for the bathroom, off-season clothes, linens, and general items. Little bags for sorting makeup and toiletries, especially for travel. We move quite a lot. Reuse boxes in drawers as drop-in containers. Lots of Ziploc bags and sandwich bags. My mom was right. I don't keep them as organized as I should. Sometimes they become containers for random things or sit nested, empty and useless. But I can take one or more containers, dump their contents into another bin, and then sort everything back into order. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When I said I really want some organizers, that was probably a cry for help. I was told it's already in a cabinet or drawer and to just keep it sorted, or that maybe I have too much stuff. What helps me keep things sorted and recognize when I have too much is organizers. Story 69. We always have plenty of good food and never go hungry. Story 70. Quality tools, shoes, and matching silverware that stack neatly in the drawer. Story 71. Clothes that fit both my style and my body. Laughing out loud. I immediately began buying all the anime-related items I wanted that were not available where I grew up or were far too expensive and out of reach of my meager teenage earnings. My husband and I still indulge our childhood desires when we can. Story 72. Train rides all over the place. Mostly back and forth to Chicago, though, because that's where the only train in my city goes. Story 73. I wanted a turbocharged rear-wheel drive manual two-door car. I bought one imported from Japan when I started working at BlackBerry Research in Motion in 2008. It was my first real job. I still have the car. It is collecting dust and is worth a lot of money today. Story 74. I bought a chocolate-dipped ice cream cone. It was small, but my parents would never let me have one when I was a child. Story 75. A trampoline. Well, after I had adult money and a place to put it. Story 76. I have a lava lamp, a fancy Mathmos model. It brings me more joy than any other lamp I have owned. Story 77. I grew up in a family of 7 in a house built for 4. I never had my own space or any privacy. I started working in 1990 and lived in a house share. I saved for 3 years and bought a flat. My own place, my rules. Achievement unlocked. Solitude. Story 78. I bought all the video games I wanted, but now I do not have the time to play them. Laughing out loud. Welcome to adult living. Story 79. Way too many Lego bricks. My parents bought me a Lego set here and there, but I always wanted a large Lego collection, which I now have. Story 80. American Fender Stratocaster. One day I might learn to play it properly. Story 81. Diablo 2 items are not pennies on the dollar, but now I got what I want. Story 82. Clothes. I had very little while I was going to school. When I got a job, I bought very nice clothes because I was working as a hostess in a large city at a popular restaurant. Felt so good to have beautiful clothes and options. Story 83. I like girly dresses. My stepfather refused to let me buy anything girly because he said it would distract boys and make me look slutty. Now I buy one gorgeous dress per year from brands like Selkie and similar labels. Story 84. My retro game collection is still in the works, but I can finally have all the Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo Entertainment System games I wanted as a kid. Story 85. A pair of Jordan sneakers. Unfortunately, I still can't get the 6s I've wanted since I was 12 years old. Now that I'm older, reason comes into play and I won't spend the money. Story 86. The game Dark Tower. My mom thought it was satanic and banned it. Story 87. Prescription sunglasses. As a kid, I always had to get transition lenses and I don't know, I felt like such a nerd with them. Story 88. I got my ears pierced. My mom said I could do it after I paid my own medical bills, in case they became infected. As soon as I moved out at 18, I went to a jewelry store and had them done. They never did. Story 89. My apartment. I grew up very unstable, and all I wanted was my own home and my own bed. Having my own bed felt like heaven. After my first job, I bought some cool pants from Hot Topic. They had chains and everything. Story 90. 98% of my Steam library is there because of my younger self. I will never play most of the games, but I cannot resist buying a $10 game that I know I would have loved when I had the time for gaming. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.